I'm Patrick Smith, and welcome to today's segment of Gov Conversations with Kevin Plexico, Vice President of Information Solutions at Deltek. Today we'll be discussing how to find growth in a challenging market.
With the federal budget crisis and sequestration, it's obviously a challenging environment for government contractors these days. How are companies being impacted?
Well, we've done some research on that, and when we looked at companies just a couple of years ago, the growth rates for companies in the federal contracting sector, about 40% of the companies that were in the market were growing. Fast forward to 2013 and it's gone down to about 30%. Still 30% of the companies growing, but certainly it's impacted companies in the sector.
Given the rhetoric around the difficult market, having 30% of the companies growing sounds pretty good. What separates the growing companies from the struggling?
So 30%, I think you're right, is pretty good. You think about other industries that have struggled much more in much more difficult circumstances than this one. We've really only had single point reductions in contract spending. So companies have been impacted, but it hasn't been like the bottom fell out of the market. But I think it's more important than ever that companies have a strategy for how they're going to grow. It's not as easy when the money's not flowing as much, it's not as easy to grow. So we looked at companies that have been successful and really found three patterns. One, they have a space that they're in, a segment of the market that they're in where they're competing effectively because it's a growth sector. Think about areas like health and C4ISR and some of the other areas that we're seeing government invest. They also have a contract channel, an area or a segment of the market where they've got a good contract relationship or set of contract relationships that are working to help bring their products and services into the market more quickly and more effectively. And then lastly, maybe they're just operating more effectively. We found a lot of companies that just have good business processes on the back end, or maybe they've built a competitive advantage in some certain segment of the market that they've found some success.
Well, let's talk about the growth segments. What are some of the areas companies are finding growth?
So healthcare is a big one. A lot of companies are looking at the health IT segment as a particularly attractive market. The federal government spends more on healthcare than any other organization in the world. If you think about Medicare and Medicaid, it's the largest payer of healthcare. And then if you think about the military health system and the Department of Veterans Affairs, the largest health provider as well. So the federal government has more to gain from driving efficiencies in healthcare than any other organization in the world, and we see them making big investments there. The other area we certainly have heard a lot about, cybersecurity and the threats against our nation, as well as efforts by our nation to project force, kind of using offensive tactics through organizations like the NSA. And so we continue to see a lot of investment in cybersecurity technologies to shore up our cyber borders, so to speak.
You mentioned task order-based contract vehicles. Why do you think that is so important?
So in this market, about 60%, if you think about segments like information technology and professional services, about 60% of what the government spends goes through a contract vehicle, whether it be a GSA schedule or a task order-based contract that a particular agency set up. And every agency is different. Every agency has a different pattern for what vehicles they gravitate to. Some might rely more on the GSA vehicles and some might rely more on their own. And so for a company to be successful, they have to be mindful of what agencies are they going to be doing business with, how do they do that business, and what are the preferred mechanisms that agency has for acquiring products and services. That alignment is critical for a company to be successful.
Lastly, you mentioned companies that have strong business operations. Is that more about driving profit, or can it help with growth as well?
Well, profit's important. In any organization, profit is one of the key components, but all companies always want to grow, and that's kind of a vitality metric for an organization, is how are we growing as well as how are we growing profitably. So profit is a part of it, especially when budgets are tight, companies' revenue tends to decline or is at least pressured. So profit is a key component of it, but if you can find that magic recipe of a competitive advantage in a space where you can deliver a good or a service at a much more cost-effective way than another company, you can find competitive advantage. And we've found that companies also that have really just done a really good job of building operational processes that allow them to scale their business cost-effectively also have a competitive advantage in the space.